Got Hamachek, the director of the Dynasty on Apple, is with us this morning. And I don't know if you can't see the Subaru of New England text line, but there are texters who say we are being played like a fiddle, like we are being gaslit by you.
I'm a gaslighter now.
Yeah, you're a gaslighter now.
Man.
You are a gaslighter, and there is... I don't know if it's just this region of the country, but there are a lot of people who don't like the way Bill Belichick ends up looking at the end of this.
All right, so here's the thing. What I have discovered over time is that this project is a lot like a Rorschach test, the inkblot test, right? And the people who are determined to see this thing as somehow as like, there's these people like we talked about earlier. Some people look at this thing and they are determined, no matter what is said or what is done, to see this as a craft puff piece that's going to, and all this stuff. And then there's other people who look at it and they say, well, this is nothing but a Belichick, hit piece. And that's all they can see. And no matter what happens, we spent an entire episode 5, is a love letter to Bill Belichick and his coaching. He loses the greatest, as he says in the thing, Tom's the greatest player of all time. That's a really difficult thing to do. And then he goes into this and he starts to talk about how you don't take a player and force them to fit into your system. You basically change your entire thing in order to make it work. The whole episode's a love letter to Bill.
Successfully, and that team went 11-5 and didn't make the playoffs. But
but that's the point. Is what is it? Bill Belichick's a chameleon, right? And he can do anything with whatever he has. And that entire episode is that. But people ignore all of that stuff, and then what they want to do is they want to say, yeah. But for 10 seconds, Tom Brady's father says that Bill is cool and calculating and all this stuff, and then therefore it's a hit piece.
What was it easy to get Bill to do it? Was it hard to
Okay, so it's the same. Every film I've ever worked on, whether it was Tiger or anything else, it takes time with some people, and it doesn't take time with others. There are some people who just show up and say, "Hey, I want to do this thing." I talked to Bill for probably 4 or 5 hours on the phone, maybe even more than that, over the course of a year probably before he finally sat down. And Bill asked the same question everybody asks, which is, how am I going to be portrayed in this thing? And my answer is always the same thing. You're going to be portrayed somewhere between the puff piece that you would make if you were making this thing and the version that your worst enemy would make of you. And in between those two things lies the truth. That's the unvarnished telling of the story. And I know that fans don't necessarily want the unvarnished telling of the story. And I know this because, like I said, I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. So I remember when Greg Jennings left the Packers, and he said, Aaron Rodgers, he's not a really good locker room guy. He doesn't lead, doesn't give you. And I remember thinking, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this guy say anything bad about my guy Aaron Rodgers. And I would get wounded, and I would be upset. And I'd say, he's just sour grapes because he got traded and all that, all this stuff. And I started, all those conspiracies start running, right? Like, why is he saying all these things?
But the Castle one, I didn't mean to cut you off because I'm just kind of listening. And as somebody who's been in locker rooms, I kind of understand the Castle one. It does, because even in that the Castle episode, there's a point where somebody goes, this is why he's the greatest coach of all time. Mm-hmm. He could do it with anybody. But see, the thing about it is the next episode is about Hernandez.
Okay.
And so where I kind of felt like I wanted a little bit more, because it does paint Bill in like, oh, you knew about all this behavior with Hernandez and you knew about this with Hernandez. Mm-hmm. My biggest thing from being somebody who's been in the locker room, and I talk about it all the time, I sat right next to Darren Sharper. Mm-hmm. I hung out with Darren Sharper and had no idea like he was drugging and raping girls. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk to, I believe it's Brandon Lloyd and Deion Branch
and Wes Welker,
they don't really give you a lot like that makes you say, like, what was he doing that made the red light or go off in your head like this dude could potentially be a bad dude? Because he was doing what a lot of guys in locker rooms do, is the childish behavior.
Couldn't agree more. I don't think the point of any of those things is to say that there's at no point in the episode where anybody says they knew what this guy was going to do, right? That was the whole point. At the end of the episode, Ernie says, in retrospect, no, of course we had no idea what was going to happen. But, he said, I can't remember what the line is, but then he says, in retrospect, maybe the best thing for him would have been to play on a West Coast team, right? Nobody had any idea, and we never say it in the episode. Nobody ever talks about it. that somehow they knew what was going to happen. There were all these little warning signs. I think the thing that was most important to me, it's interesting, was I still remember when I was interviewing Deion Branch for the series. And it was a 3-hour long interview, just like all of these were at least 3 hours long. And so we're talking about all the things that you would do if you were interviewing Deion Branch. We talk about the Super Bowl MVP, because at that point in time, we didn't know where we were going to cover that. And then one of the producers, a guy named Vin, texts me in the middle of the interview, and he says, "Hey, I think Deion may have known Aaron." And so I just say, "Deion, tell me about Aaron." So if you've watched the episode, starts out and there's Aaron Hernandez is in front of the green screen, and he's doing that thing that's for either for one of the primetime football moments or it's for the in stadium. I have no idea what it was used for. And then it cuts to Deion, and he says, "We called him Chico Man." And so what that is I'm sitting there asking, I said to Deion, "Tell me about Aaron," and his response is, "We called him Chico Man." And so what I started to realize as I talked to these guys is that, yes, there was this tragedy there, and yes, there were these details of these, quote unquote warning signs or whatever, right? But they cared deeply about this guy. And that was the thing that was the most interesting to me. And it was one of those moments, and I think our philosophy for the entire series was, we're going to ask questions, and then we're going to get out of the way and let these guys tell the stories. And that episode in particular, it was extremely important for me to say, tell me what it was like, and I'm going to get out of the way. And we showed, yes, that there's a tragedy there, but also how much all of these people cared deeply about Aaron.
But you don't think you did Bill a little bit dirty when you just include a tiny portion of the press conference that he did about Aaron Hernandez, and it looks like he doesn't want to talk about it?
So he starts off and he says, there's a great tragedy here. And I can't remember the exact line is, right? But we let him say the first couple lines of his thing. And then we go on to show at the end of the press conference, he says, "It's over. We're not talking about it anymore." Now look, if you're making like a 40-minute long episode, yeah, I could show an entire press conference, right? Or I could show an extra 3 minutes of it.
Or another piece of footage where Bill is talking extensively about the horror of the situation.
Yeah, but he does that in the scene. He starts off and he talks about that, and he talks to, you never want to have this happen in your organization and everything. And then at the end of his press conference, it ends with him being asked a bunch of questions and him saying,
the middle
"I'm
part.
not." But if that's what you want, but that's the thing is that's on YouTube.
Yeah,
that's not. We're not taking every press conference that happened, and we're not in. But again, Go ahead.
Yeah. Ernest, go ahead.
So my question for you, twofold. One on Bill, he says to you, "Matt, we talked about that."
Oh, you're talking about in episode 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
We might not have you back, but I'm just curious. Were there topics you said you were not going to discuss that you then discussed?
The only thing that I ever said to anybody, and I kind of knew this from the beginning, was I had no interest in delving into these people's personal lives. So what I mean by that is we don't get into the Giselle story. Obviously, one of the things people always love to say, the people that are on the Subaru text chain,
line,
is obviously that the only thing that drove any decision I made was because I wanted to get more eyeballs on this thing, right? Well, if I wanted to get eyeballs, I can guarantee you the one thing that I would have covered and made an entire episode about is Giselle and Tom's relationship, right? Because that would have gotten a ton of eyeballs. I didn't cover Bill's divorce. I didn't cover the extramarital affairs there. I didn't cover Florida with Robert. I didn't cover anybody's personal life. But Myra Kraft.
You got a little bit of Tom and Giselle, like him in New York, walking around.
But that was the point of that.
Dating a supermodel.
100%. But the point of that wasn't because I wanted to show Giselle. It was because he had the boot on his foot and he got caught by the paparazzi. And then what does that mean leading into the Super Bowl against the Giants, right? That was the point of that. It wasn't because I just wanted to show Giselle.
I think the beginning of that scene, and I get what you're saying, because at the end, yes, the boot part was a big part of that episode. But in the beginning of it, it was like Tom all of a sudden is dating like a supermodel. He's in New York and walking in the West Village.
I hear you. There's one line in it. It's from Scott Pioli, actually, the one who says it. He says, Tom was in New York. He had injured himself in the AFC Championship game, and the paparazzi caught it. He was with his girlfriend who would become his wife, and he was caught by the paparazzi with a boot on his foot, right? And immediately it goes into snap, 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 snap. He has a boot, and then it's like, who's afraid of Tom Brady now, right? And so the boot and that story lines up with what Michael Strahan says, which is we knew he was the catalyst of that offense, and we were going to come after him, and we show his ankle, and we hear the announcers talking about it, so that was an important thing to cover. So she's mentioned that time, and then there's like a photo of her and Nancy Brady in episode 5 says he had Giselle by his side, and that was it.
And then she comes up a little bit later, but we're not there yet
footage.
for the
After the
talking
20.
about. Yeah, but we're not there yet.
yeah, I know what
it
you're talking
seems
about. I know what
like
you're
it
talking
seems
about.
like
Yeah,
you've talked to Ernie Adams a lot after. Have you talked to the Crafts? Have you talked to Belichick? Have you talked to Brady on how they feel they've come across in this?
No, I can assure you, I don't have Tom Brady's phone number, and he's not calling up the documentary director and telling him, you know what, Matt, I want to talk to you about it. I really thought episode 4
Has Ernie
was
talked
good.
to them?
I don't know. I had dinner with Ernie last night. He likes it.
Ernie likes it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
That's
did
surprising.
Tom Brady refuse to talk about Aaron Hernandez?
No.
Okay, why didn't you include Tom Brady talking?
Look, I got 3 hours. I got 3 hours with these guys, right? And you said
Wait a minute. You're talking about Tom Brady.
Yeah. So I have a choice. No, but listen, I have a choice. I have a choice to make. Okay. I have to pick and choose the things that I wanted to go into depth on. So what do I want to talk to Tom Brady about? I could have asked him about Aaron Hernandez. That's totally fair. I wanted to focus on Deflategate with him. I needed to ask him multiple questions about that.
Yeah.
Press conference that he fumbles through, and he even admits he didn't handle very well. I wanted to give him a chance to be on the record and make comments about it, which he at first says no and then has other conversations about later. I wanted to ask him about Guerrero and how that relationship formed, all sorts of different things. Now, if I had had 5 hours, maybe more, I would have definitely gone into the Hernandez things. But you got to pick and choose because you have a limited amount of time with these people, and you just have to make choices.
When you have dinner with Ernie Adams, does he have extensive notes on the staff who work at the restaurant and their particulars when it comes to
if there's
cooking?
one human in this entire story that I have a great amount of affection for, it's Ernie Adams.
Ernie
That guy's
Adams.
great.
Yes, Curtis. Go ahead.
The other thing I would say is I recognize all the points you've made about Bill and that you're trying to do a thing that's a fair depiction of their time during this dynasty. The Aaron Hernandez document, the Aaron Hernandez episode, I thought was really, really improperly done for Bill Belichick.
And why?
Because everybody on the episode appears decisive, either in their opinions of him as a player, whether that was Brandon, Wes, or Dion, or in Jonathan Kraft saying that the second he found out about this investigation in Odin Lloyd, that his dad's gone and Bill's out of the country.
Yeah.
And that, Bill, he would always look at the football guy. I think if anybody knew that Aaron Hernandez was a murderer, he wouldn't have been within a mile of the facility.
So I have a different take on that entire moment. And there's two things that happen in this. Now, I'm not saying as a fan that this is necessarily what I would like, but if I was a football player who was wrapped up in something like this, right? Whatever it is, whether it's I'm accused of this or anything else. In that episode, you have an owner who is saying, Aaron, I will get you an attorney on my dime because I'm sure you had a good reason to do this. And you have a coach who's basically not in the country at the time, doesn't see what's going on, and all he's saying is, let's let due process play itself out. This is something that is like, in my opinion at least, our society has gotten way too close to just passing judgment on somebody who's been accused of something, and then all of a sudden it goes by. So if I'm a player in the NFL who's wrapped up in something, and I have an owner who's saying, I'll hire an attorney on my dime to basically take care of you, and a coach who's saying, let's just let due process play itself out. That's what I would like. Those are the kind of people that I would like to go work for, right?
And you think that episode makes Bill look like that guy?
I'm saying that everybody interprets that as somehow, that's a moment where somebody's trying to take a dig at him or something like that. I think people, like I said, this is the Rorschach test part of this thing, is if you see that you guys are in this little bubble.
Yeah.
There are these like turf wars that have been playing out over the course of 20 years that when I started this thing, was completely unaware of, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's trying to figure out, because Bill's gone now, like, is this thing being said because they're trying? I could care less about all that stuff when I'm asking these questions. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to get, again, I just keep trying to get to the question of what does it take to accomplish greatness? Part of what it takes to accomplish greatness is that, like Ernie Adams says, we were getting first-round talent for fourth-round draft pick or whatever his line is. I can't remember. And they were willing to take that risk.
Well, it was Jonathan that made it seem like it was a bad look on Bill, because I get what you're trying to say, but then the clip of Jonathan dropping the F-bomb of like, if it was up to this
because
MFer, or I can't remember how he said it, he would have still been here. And that would, rather than Bill, like how you worded it there, like, I get what you're saying, but it didn't come off that way in the...
Hold on. So let's just be clear about what was going on in that scene. There are two guys who are out of the country, right? And all Jonathan says is that he's basically trying to explain to them in the moment. They're not there. He's watching the TV. I don't know where they were. Bill's like in Croatia or something like that, right? And I don't remember where Robert is. They obviously don't have the feed of Aaron in handcuffs walking out of the house. They don't know what this looks like, right? So he's trying to convey something. And all he says is, Bill, as is his wanted due process to play itself out initially. By the end of the conversation, they all come to a conclusion collectively of what's going to happen, which is that they're going to, I can't remember exactly the timeline, but eventually they cut him from the team or something like that. I can't remember what it is exactly. But then there's this moment where what you're talking about is not because of how it looked, but because we had to set an effing example, right? That's what he says. Now,
and he goes, Bill, if it was up to Bill...
No, but he says, Bill, as is his want, would like to let this thing play out.
But he didn't say his dad. He didn't include his dad into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here's the issue. We've talked at length about things that are on the cutting room floor, whether it's Troy Brown or others.
Yeah.
You could have just said the three came to a conclusion that it was the right decision to release him without Jonathan Kraft being the white knight saying they were out of the country and by God I was the president and I was at the ship and I said we got to release him.
Yeah, I mean you're saying a lot more there than was actually said, but I thought it was pretty remarkable to see a person like Jonathan Kraft say, not because of this, but because we had to set an effing example. Like that's an interesting thing for him to say. My philosophy is, hold on, because this is really important. I want to talk about this. The thing is, there is an assumption here that I did that and included that because I'm trying to like put a point up in these turf wars that I was talking about, these things that have been going on in this town and in this bubble for like 20 years. I'm putting it in there because it's an interesting thing to hear a person like Jonathan Kraft talk about that. The same way it's just as interesting to hear Jonathan Kraft say at the end of episode 4 when he walks into the locker room and he says, there were, you see him and he's saying, there were guys in there that were crying and throwing up on the floor, and I'm trying to figure out how to say that, and then he just pauses and he stares off into space, and he's just reliving this moment. That's an interesting thing to hear him say, and it's part of a larger story, but it's not part of the battles that you guys are always talking about.
No, I understand that,
radio.
and I know we have limited time left with you, so I and we can take a quick break and then wrap up. But I said this earlier. I think that we may be pointing, those of us that feel like this comes off as doing Bill dirty or a hit piece on Bill Belichick are pointing the finger in the wrong direction. It may not be your intent. It may be that we need to hold those accountable who said the things that put Bill in a different light. In my mind, Bill didn't answer a lot of questions. He never does. I think that's a classy approach, and that is what I expect from Bill Belichick. Everybody else, or not everybody, but a lot of people couldn't wait to say things about Bill Belichick. So that's, that's the way I view it.
And just like Teddy Bruschi couldn't wait to say, I am the towel and Bill is the hands that are wringing the talent out of me. I might not like it, but that's what gets us to win.
He did include all that too.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, there's some things that are said that people interpret a certain way. It's just, this is what people talked about. I got out of the way. And the same thing happened with Bill. Everybody says like, oh, what's on the cutting room floor? The reason that sometimes I have to hang on Bill and show him just staring into camera is because I wanted to show people when I ask him these questions, there's nothing left. It's not that I decided, oh, I'm only going to show him saying no, and then like he said all these interesting things afterwards. Yeah. What's there is there. And I had to ask him these questions. You know what? I remember after the Aaron Hernandez episode, I was talking to Ernie Adams about it, and he said all the things that we've already discussed on this. And at the end of it, he gets up and we shake hands, and he goes, "That was tough. That was a really, really tough thing to ask. But if you didn't ask me those questions, you wouldn't have been doing your job." That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
I have to ask people these questions.